I'll get straight to it. Our next speaker have been designing games for 15 years, starting as a student making Quake mods, making her way through various companies and titles, and ending up starting her own company, Lady Shotgun. Please welcome Anna Marsh.
Okay, is this one of these ones that turns on automatically? Yes, yes, right, okay, cool, let's go. So analog in game mechanics is like gravity in real life. You can't see it, there's no physical element or particle that proves its existence, but it affects how everything that you do in the world of the game or in the real life world feels to do those things. It's incredibly important. How many people here are game designers? Hey, how many are free to play game designers? Okay, so all you lot, I'm probably going to be telling you stuff you absolutely already know, so I'm sorry about that. But I started off my career working on big console AAA titles and learning an awful lot about how the analog works in those titles to create the feel of the game and to make a really great game. And over the last few years, I've been having a journey of setting up my own company, doing my own indie stuff with a team, and now getting to the point of making free-to-play games, which is something that I'm very excited about and interested in as a new way of experiencing games and trying to work out how I apply everything that I learned in the console world about how to make a game feel really great, and then how do we apply this to this new way of experiencing games. So when we talk about analog in game mechanics, basically what we mean is that a player is going to have a range of results from the actions that they take in the game. So this is not analog. This is a Tomb Raider title that I did work on, Tomb Raider Anniversary. I am not responsible for the QuickTime events. That's a Tomb Raider one that I didn't. I'd left by the time they did the last one. I was at Eidos. So basically, QuickTime events, the bane of every game designer's life. So this is not an analog mechanic. You press the button or you don't. You die or you live. There's no in-between states of that. It's digital. And games use them, some games use them pretty well, some games use them very poorly. Who would want to play a game entirely made out of QuickTime events? So, oh, okay, so there's a few people there. But essentially, that is not an analog mechanic, and it's not what makes a game feel really great. This is analog. So I think Angry Birds is this really beautiful, simple way of describing how analog works, because we all know you're going to fire your bird from the, what do you call one of those things? Catapult, that's what you call it. But the actual result that you're going to get is going to be really analog, depending on where he hit. The tiny little differences in where he hits going to dictate how many pigs die, how the structure falls down. So it's unlikely that any two players are going to get exactly the same result every time. So if you are a game designer, then you've probably encountered something like this, that the good feel in a game comes from predictable outcomes and analog results. And the first time I encountered it, it was actually explained to me as predictable outcomes and different results, which can be a bit of a puzzle because you're thinking, how do I make the game predictable but still different for every player? But during my first games that I worked on, my first job was at Sony Psygnosis, when there was a Sony Psygnosis. And my job as junior designer was to do the vehicle and the weapons handling. And I got this job because they said I was the most technical designer on the team. And when someone calls you the most technical designer on a team, that is not a compliment. That means you're the most boring one who's going to sit there with a database of numbers and quite enjoy it while all the other designers come up with the crazy ideas. But actually, I'm really pleased that I got to do this job because it really clarified for me in my mind the essence of making an analog experience. Because when you take all the all the data, all the variables that you use to balance vehicle handling and weapon handling, the fire rate and the turning acceleration and the torque and all those other lovely data fields that you get that the physics models use to create the game. And you really get a really very good understanding of how you create the feel of the game. And in this game, Dropship, actually no one was really watching what I was doing, and I got very obsessed with being able to power slide all the vehicles, like even dirty great tanks, power slide them around. Within a game with vehicles, the predictable outcome is when you press the accelerator, you know the vehicle is going to go forward, right? But exactly how it goes forward is going to be dependent on the physics and the surface that you're driving on. And when you fire a weapon, you know when you fire, that's predictable. But actually, what happens is going to depend on what the enemy's doing, whether you've got any bullets left in your gun, etc. So when I'd done these two games, I thought I had a very good understanding of Analogue and how it worked. And then the next game that I worked on was so bad and so terrible that I haven't even put a screenshot up there because it's too embarrassing to admit to it. And it was one of these projects from hell, and if you work in a big company, we've all done that. You know, the schedule is a work of pure fiction, the producer is a man on the edge, nothing is realistic or doable. And it was a game with melee combat in it. And I'd never done melee combat as a designer before. I'd come from shooting and weapons. Shooting and driving, should I say, so the vehicles. And I knew nothing about how to design melee combat. So we made every mistake that it was possible to make. But the most heinous mistake was that when we implemented the combos, we implemented them as one long animation. So basically, there was absolutely no analog experience for the players. It was more or less like a quick time event that no matter how the player entered that button combo, they were always going to get the same animations with the same timing. And everybody told me that this was really bad and it was terrible, but nobody could really explain to me why it was terrible. And someone came up with that classic, there's not enough combat moves. If anybody ever tells you there's not enough combat moves and that's what's wrong with the game, that is almost certainly not the reason that the combat's not any good. So myself and the other designers, and we sat down and we looked at dozens of other games, dozens of other melee combat games that were doing this right. And we ended up separating up those animations and making it so that each animation was interruptible. You could cancel from one animation into another animation. So the result was not only more responsible, but it was also more analog. So maybe one player is going to trigger the second animation at 7 frames in, and another one's going to trigger it at 10 frames in. So what you end up with is a far better feel to the melee combat. And that kind of taught me that when you're moving from one type of game to another type of game, that you essentially need to remember what you've learned from one type of game. So all that stuff I knew about creating analog from the shooting and the weapons, I failed to take that into the melee combat. So having learned that, I now knew that analog is going to be really important in whatever game that I'm working on. So fast forward about 10 years, and free-to-play started to happen. And this is the first free-to-play game that I encountered, which is called Mafia Wars, which was one of Zynga's first. I don't know how many of you played this game. Yay, some people. But look at that. It's beautiful, all that text. You can hardly read it, can you? But I was completely and utterly bemused in this because when you see the jobs down here on the left-hand side, so muscle in on a local casino. But when you did that job, when you do that job, it was done automatically. You click the button and that's it, the job is done. There's no shooting involved, there's no driving involved, you don't actually go onto another screen and do anything. This is all that happens, is you click the button and you use up the energy and that's it. And I was thinking, how does that work? There's absolutely how's there any analog at all? There's not even any timing like a quick time event. All you do is click the button. So that was kind of very mystifying to me as someone who spent a lot of their time working analog into very low-level mechanics. And as I was looking more at free-to-play games, I encountered this issue, which is how do you get the analog feel to work with the monetization? So this is a screenshot from The Drowning by Scattered Entertainment. So this was a game that I was very much looking forward to, because I like first-person shooters, I like playing games on my mobile. And I don't know how many of you played this, but as soon as it was available to download on the hard launch, I downloaded it and I started playing it, and I was quite enjoying it. And the first opportunity it gave me to monetize, which was, would you like to buy this new weapon? I thought, well, yes, I'm enjoying this game. I'm going to buy this new weapon. But what I ended up with was not a new weapon I could use. It was a broken weapon that I then had to find parts for, to fix, to use. And I did not get a feeling of delight from that. I don't know how many of you know Oscar Clarke and his fantastic talks about free-to-play design, but he always talks about in-app purchasing should delight the user. And getting a broken weapon did not delight me at all. In fact, I stopped playing the game. So this kind of like showed up an issue to me that if you are going to monetize a game, you want delight, you want value for your money. You don't want to feel like you've just been ripped off. You want a clear benefit from a purchase. Now, how do you go about balancing those weapons so they feel great to play, but they also have these clear upgrades that are strong enough to justify the purchase without totally screwing up all that very careful balancing that you've done? And this is a very tricky thing. So in my mind, I was thinking, this is going to be very difficult, analog and monetization. However, I started playing a lot of other free-to-play games just to get my head around it. And I started to notice something that I hadn't noticed before, which was how much analog there were in the much higher levels of the game design. So not in the very low levels of the like nitty-gritty of that second-to-second mechanics, but in the freedom that the players had to arrange things and do things their way. So these are screenshots from Heyday, and one of the first things I noted in Heyday when I started to visit other people's farms was how much variety there were. People hadn't just bunged down the stuff in their farms. Some people, and unfortunately I haven't got screenshots of them, but you know, some people would write words with their crops, like they'd write their name in the crops, and some people would plant their crops in a way, so we've got flowers and then the wheat, so you get these really pretty purple and yellow patterns in it. And they were taking like an awful amount of care in laying out a farm, which there's no score attached to that. There's no kind of like competition on who can have the prettiest farm. But this was something that people obviously found value in, that they could go and lay out their farms in all these different ways. And that was very, very, very interesting to me, that people would spend the time to do that. So there was an awful lot of analog in the farm layout, and also in the way that you grow and combine the crops and then sell them on, that although there's no low-level mechanics in how well you grow your crops, the way that you grow them and combine them into different products to sell them is very analog, in that it's very unlikely that two players are going to ever pick the same amount of things to plant and combine and sell. So I'm going to talk about 3 examples now that are games that I play and that crucially I have monetized. So you can see that this is how much I like them, because I've put money into them. And the first one is Clash of Clans, which I think is a really excellently designed game. Does everybody know what Clash of Clans is? Yes. So you have it's kind of like how would you call it? Yeah, kind of like an RTS. So you get your base, you've got your defenses, you've got your troop manufacturers that make the troops, you've got your resource generators. And just like Heyday, one of the first things you noticed is how differently people lay out their bases. And if you go and you have a look at forums when they talk about this, there's all these theories about what is the best base layout for defense, and I'm really interested in that, and I can spend an awful lot of time rearranging my base very carefully. And I think the crucial thing here, in Heyday, you can kind of put anything you want anywhere, and this is a very free system, but in Clash of Clans, you've got limits of items that you can put down. So you only have so many walls that you can use, which forces you to make a decision, because you cannot enclose all of your units, all of the buildings that you've got, you just do not have enough wall to enclose them all. So I think this encourages the analog way that you lay out the base, because you've suddenly got to start thinking which buildings am I going to sacrifice, which ones am I going to leave outside of the walls. So it's very interesting to go to other people's bases and see which ones they've decided this is very analog, who's decided to sacrifice their resource generators and who's decided to sacrifice their defense units, for example, by leaving them outside of the walls. And troop production, the troops that you produce, and the way that the timed events, so there's a lot of timed events. It takes you so long to manufacture troops. It takes you so long to generate resources. So the way that the very high levels, sorry, not making any sense. So at the higher levels, the choice that you're taking of how you're going to lay out your troops, what troops you're going to make, that's quite analog. So there's not very much analog at the low level, but it's all at the higher level. This is my favorite game at the moment, which is Honor Bound, which is RPG. And in Honor Bound, you can go out, you have one hero, and then this hero can go out and capture any other enemy in the game. So you end up with dozens and dozens of possible hero characters. I don't even know how many possible hero characters that there are in this game. And hundreds of potential teams that you could make up when you go out and you do your adventuring. And as soon as I started to play the game, I realized how much depth there was in this, that there was all these, like, wow, how many characters? And then as well, and I'm sorry, I seem to have got a screenshot from some site about how to hack Honor Bound, so I apologize for that. But the way that you upgrade and you research the upgrades means that it increases that analog aspect of it even more, that the heroes that you're going to have in your team, it's going to be incredibly unlikely that two players are ever going to have the same kind of team. And here's one that's totally different, high school story. This is something that's complete escapism for me, because I'm British and I'm 42, so I'm never ever going to high school, right? But the tagline is "Live high school your way," and this is a game that I didn't think I was going to enjoy at all, but actually I adore it because it's a real character customization buffet, in that all the characters that you get, all the characters that join your school, you have complete freedom, pretty much. I've never seen a mobile game with quite so much customization options within it. So you can be any skin color, you can have any hair color, you can dress them up in different ways, their faces, there's different configurations for their faces. It's very, very analog, the way that you set up their characters. And also, you can make choices over their sexual orientation. So you can send characters on dates with each other. So you can make them straight, you can make them gay, you can make them change about. And you choose which characters do what missions. So again, although there's not a lot of low-level mechanics for you to be doing, the way that the high-level mechanics work and the characters work is really varied. And what this got me thinking is that although at first when you look at free-to-play games, if you've come from a console game world, it can be a little bit mystifying exactly how that works, how all that stuff that you like, all the shooting and the driving and the way that a console game works and where it gets its good feel from. And you can't see any of that in a free-to-play game. But actually when you compare the two together, and I want to compare The Last of Us with High School Story, because, hey, nobody else is going to, right? That The Last of Us is a good game. It's a great game. It feels great to play. It's very enjoyable. It's low-level mechanic analogs. Its analog, rather, resides at the low levels. You choose your weapons and how you approach your combat. But there's absolutely no analog at the higher levels. I can't change what Ellie, and I forgot the guy's name. Sorry, anybody remember his name? Okay, yeah. You can't change what they look like. You can't change who they are. You can't change what they do. You're absolutely fixed on this path that has been decided for them. How many people would have let Ellie die at the end? I would have done. I'm glad there's one other person. I was really annoyed that at the end, Joel made the decision that he was not going to let her die. I'm not going to let her die, man. I'm going to like be the hero. I would not have made that choice, which is it might sound a bit evil. Sorry. We can't really go back on that, can we? But there is no choice. There's absolutely no choice at the story level of most AAA games. You've got to do what they say you're going to do, whether you want to or not. And this is a case where I didn't want to, and that rather annoyed me. And I almost didn't finish the game, but I did. Whereas in the high school story, there's a huge amount of analog at that high level. I can change what they look like, I can change what they do, I can change who they date. And although there's no low-level mechanics at all, there's a great deal of enjoyment in actually creating this world and these characters the way that you want to do that. And I don't think this is a case, by the way, of one method being better than another method. I played The Last of Us. It's not my favorite game, but it was enjoyable. I enjoyed that. And I enjoy High School Story. And different people like different games for different reasons. So that's entirely, that's all cool, I think, in a game design world. So, of course, there are free-to-play games that do put their analog at a lower level. And I'm sure we all know what these games are, Candy Crush and Bubble Witch. But when free-to-play games do that, they generally, the purchases that they're putting in there are for temporary power-ups. Or, you know, you've used up your energy, so here's another life. It's kind of like an arcade system of monetization. So that the monetization that you're putting in is not kind of totally unbalancing the game, the rest of the game forever. So I have a theory called which I like to call the beanbag theory. As everybody knows what a beanbag is. Yeah, good. So if you have a beanbag that's got too many beans in, like you're not going to be able to sit on that, right? You'll keep falling off it. And if you've got a beanbag with too few beans on it, that's going to be very uncomfortable to sit on because your arse is going to keep hitting the floor. So games feel good when they've got the right amount of beans in them. It's the same way as a beanbag feels best to sit on when it's got the right amount of beans to put on, which I don't know, it's maybe a little bit of a not a very clear way to say that you can have too much analog, and you can try and if you try and put analog everywhere, then you're probably going to overstuff the beanbag, as it were, and make it too confusing for players. If you're trying to put your analog into both the high and the low levels, you risk ending up with a mechanic soup that's simply not fun to play. And of course, there are games like GTA and Mass Effect that have analog at both levels to differing degrees. But these are huge games that take a very long while to make. So when I'm looking at a game, and when I'm looking at the game design, what I'm looking for is what aisle of the game am I going to put the analog in? You know, what section of the game am I going to make sure? I know that there needs to be analog somewhere. Where am I going to put it? And essentially, it's the range of choice that creates the analog. So, and when I say choice, that doesn't necessarily mean choosing items or choosing missions. It can be in a shooter, I'm choosing when to fire my weapon. I'm choosing what weapon to use. And this is what creates the analog in a shooter, because what weapon I'm using and exactly when I fire it is going to create the result that happens at the end result of firing that weapon. If I'm playing a driving game, when I choose to turn right and I choose to turn left, and how much I do that by, again, that's going to create the analog feel. But choosing where you put that range of choice as a designer is going to dictate where the analog happens. And analog leads to autonomy. When I speak about free-to-play games, autonomy is one of those things that's always pegged as something that's really, really vital for engagement, that people feel like they have autonomy in a world. And I think, to me, the range of analog that they've got is what leads to this sense of autonomy. And autonomy makes players feel in control, like they are part of the world and they are having an effect within this world, which again leads back to the engagement, which is very important. So how did I apply all this to the game we're working on? Well, the game we're working on is incredibly early at the moment, so I don't have too much. I'm not going to show you too much about it, but it's a game that's all about antiques and collecting antiques. And it's aimed at a female demographic over 35, which is quite a big demographic in mobile now. So when I was thinking about how is this going to work, I was thinking, where are we going to have the analog within this game? So we've applied analog in a number of different ways in the game. So each antique has a varying number of conditions. It can be broken, it can be dirty, it can be clean, and you can actually go ahead and affect that by restoring it yourself. But then the condition of the item, and when you go to sell it, is then going to define how long it's going to take to sell. So there's some analog there between the objects you're getting and then the result that you're getting when you sell them. And when you go on an expedition to gain this, there's some degree, there's some parameters of randomization there. So no two players are ever going to have the same collection of antiques, because that's being randomized, what they're getting from a mission, from an expedition. And then we have some restorations, which is rather like a jigsaw. So again, that's a very nice analog feel to doing this, because you're choosing which piece to pick up and when to place it. So this is my first experience of making a free-to-play game for my own company. So hopefully this is going to work, and all that stuff that I've learned from the importance of analog and how we've applied it within the game is going to make a game that feels great to play, for at least for our demographic. So I'm not quite sure how long that talk's gone on, or if it was long enough or not long enough. But anyway, this is me. This is the new company, is Tickety Boom. I don't think the website works yet, but the Facebook and the Twitter does. So thank you. And questions, discussions, I guess. We got time for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about quick times events, and I was wondering, you have these specific kind of games where, from Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, and I wonder about how do you think they found kind of a sweet spot in them trying to make quick time events more analog?
They didn't for me. Obviously they did for some people, because some people enjoyed them, but I really tried very hard to play Heavy Rain, and I couldn't, because I don't enjoy that style of play. You know, I enjoy the analog of a shooter when you choose, you know, and I enjoy the analog of a racing game, and I enjoy the analog in the free-to-play games that I spoke about, where you've got the freedom to do things. I find games like Heavy Rain are much too locked. Just as I didn't enjoy being told what to do in The Last of Us when I gave that big spoiler. I don't enjoy being told exactly what to do as a gamer. But I guess enough people enjoyed Heavy Rain that there are people that kind of enjoy that style of play. So someone with asking a question here in the middle.
Yeah, hi. I'm going to talk slightly about the end of Last of Us, so if anyone don't want to hear that, just plug your ears. The end of Last of Us, where you're in the examination room, you get actually a choice I didn't actually know about. When you take down the first doctor, you can pick up Ellie and leave. But what I didn't know is you can actually kill the rest of the medical team. And that was quite a eye-opening for me, because that indicates that you no longer care about just yourself and Ellie, but you are now just a killer. Because during the whole game, you defended yourself and Ellie from murderous crazy guys with weapons, and now you just killed 2 innocent doctors. So for me, that was quite an epiphany and a good analog for me, indicating what kind of player you are.
I think for me, and I know I used to have a boss that called me the Ice Queen because he thought I was so cold and unemotional. If I'm playing a game where the core of the game, the analog of the game is at the low level, like the shooting and the driving, I couldn't give a monkeys about those characters. What annoyed me about The Last of Us, that they were presenting this character that I was supposed to care about. This is like your daughter. I was like, I have a daughter. There is no way I'm going to feel the same about that game character as my own. And that annoyed me. What I wanted to do is I wanted to go out and kill people because that was the core mechanic of the game. I don't actually think when I'm shooting people that this is like really shooting people. I know it's a game, right? So for me, the challenge and the enjoyment of the game is the shooting the people, not the characters. And I think what was interesting for me when I encountered the free-to-play games like I encountered High School, all of a sudden I care about these characters because this is where the core of the game and the analog is, that I've created these characters and I have this character called Pinky with pink hair and like I love her, like, you know, she's my favorite character. And I care a lot more about those characters there because that's the core mechanic of the game than I'm ever going to care for all their careful story and animation and blah, blah, blah. If I'm playing a game that's a shooter, I want to go shoot people. I mean, everybody's different, right? But for me, if I care about the characters, depends on if the characters are part of the core mechanic, the core analog part of the game.
Thank you.
There's a chap with a purple, sorry, purple one who's been wanting to ask a question for ages, sorry.
You talked about QTEs, and is there any game that is basically just QuickTime events that you have played that you liked?
No, I like the QuickTime events. No, I like God of War, but I think they did their QuickTime events with analog in them. So when you chose to trigger the QuickTime event. So that was a choice that you were taking. I want to do this QuickTime event. And then there was... I think God of War was the only game for me that used them in a way. I mean, usually I'm like, you know, swearing words when that little button prompt, you know, and on games that I've worked on, it's never the designers that say, let's have a QuickTime event here. It's almost always someone in brand or someone in marketing that says, hey, I don't know why I did them with an American accent. I'm really sorry to any Americans. That's very offensive, isn't it? And you know, but yeah, it's always someone outside of the design team, in my experience, that usually suggests a QuickTime event. But you know, different people like different things.
So if you were to make or to be the one that took all the shots, would you say no QuickTime events?
Yeah, yeah, I would. So, did you have a question? Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Again, about QuickTime events. Rhythm games. Are there analog in those, or is it just boring QuickTime?
Is there analog in rhythm games? I don't know. I've not sat down and really examined a rhythm game. so sorry. And I have played one a long time ago. I don't know if there is, but I guess if they feel great to play, there is some kind of analog in there somewhere. But I can't give you a really good answer on that one, sorry. What do you think?
I don't know. I was just wondering. I like it. No, yeah.
I was thinking of, well, a different type of FTP game where, for instance, the Fortress 2, where the core mechanics and the analog is in the shooting and the killing of other people, but you can purchase the more like customizing analog where you buy hats and stuff for your character, and what you think of that model.
I haven't played, I have downloaded a few like that, and I haven't played them very much. And I think, so to me, I guess I don't enjoy them. I don't enjoy them the way that I enjoy High School Story or Honor Bound or the Clash of Clans, which I have played a lot and I have monetized. And I think and obviously some people are going to do it and some people are going to do it really, really well, that there is a way to combine the low-level mechanics that have got the analog with the monetization. That's obviously something that someone's going to do somewhere. I haven't encountered a game that I've found is great like that yet. So someone will solve it. But I think once that's when you get into that area where people go, oh, pay to win, free to lose, pay to win. And, I think, obviously this is something that someone's going to solve, but personally I haven't enjoyed a game where the core mechanic is the low level, the free to play, the core is a low level with the monetization attached to buying upgrades and what have you.
Yeah, it's about doing both kinds of analog, both high and low. You said that in order to do that, you would need a massive budget on the line of something like what? Yeah,
I mentioned GTA and Mass
Yeah.
Effect, but it's not to say that there aren't smaller games that are doing that as well.
because take for example a game like Minecraft. That is a example of doing both types really, really well, I would say.
Yes, although they probably have now had quite a big budget, haven't they? I mean,
Yes, but to be fair, almost from the launch, you were able to. They had both types really, really well.
yeah, but again, I don't. So, yes, you're completely right. But it isn't a game where there's absolutely, you haven't got a load of characters to this is not a game where there's a whole massive range of things to do in it. They've still got limitations on what you can do. So I think the core thing is that wherever the analog's going, and if you're putting analog at the high and the low level, there has to be some limitations somewhere. Otherwise, you just end up with unfocus in the game.
I suppose.
So what about just story-driven sequences that aren't quick time events, like you don't press any buttons, or it's just a focused story? Do you not enjoy those just because they're very not analog?
I enjoyed Dear Esther, which is probably the most extreme example of something where it's just a story. But I think there is analog in Dear Esther because how you move around the island is entirely up to you. You're not being forced to go here or to go there. I mean, you are guided around the path, but the timing that you take to do it, there's no point, you said, quick, press X or you're going to die here, So I don't know if you're thinking and Gone Home, which again is a lot about the story, but again, I'm not being told you must do this right now. I've got a lot of analog in how I move around the house and how I encounter those things. So I think when you think about the analog, it can sometimes be quite difficult to understand where it resides. So, like the question about rhythm action games, that there probably is analog in there somewhere. I haven't looked at it. But it can be a little bit difficult to see where the analog resides. But I think in Dear Esther and Gone Home, there's an awful lot of analog in how you encounter the game, even though the story is kind of fixed, if that answers the question.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.